Hey everyone, this is Sandeep Aujla, CFO at Intuit, and you're listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 1089.
The telecommunications industry and kind of where it is in its life cycle. And so it's competitive, it's saturated. So companies, particularly along our side, have to find a way to evolve. I was attracted to the opportunity because it was, kind of taking this legacy telecommunications business and evolving it into a cloud communications business. We're more than halfway through with regards to executing on that strategy, and I feel strong about where we're headed. We still have some more things to go and do, but we feel really confident about our ability to do it because we bid off much larger projects last year and executed on those. So I think we're all pretty excited about, where we end up a year from now.
He was 60 days into a new role when Brian McClintock tells us he realized the company's monthly profit was actually $1 million loss. As he reviewed the financials, he discovered that each rosy figure concealed another troubling truth. For many executives, panic may have followed. Instead, McClintock's response underscored what may be his CFO career's guiding principle: stay calm, confident, and resilient. Our talk with Brian McClintock begins after this.
When it comes to company spend, most finance teams are on defense, reacting to surprise spend, chasing receipts, saying no. But there's a better way. Meet Brex, the AI-powered spend platform that boosts a company's control, earnings, and speed. 99% of customer spend is compliant. 11 million hours saved on expenses and accounting through automation. $681 million plus back to customers in business building rewards. Make every dollar count with Brex.
Hello, we're speaking with Brian McClintock, CFO of Fusion Connect. Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Jack.
Brian, if you were to trace your career path back to its early days, we wondered if you wouldn't mind trying to identify those moments, whether they were challenges or milestones or even unexpected detours that you believe perhaps influenced your readiness to become a CFO. What happened to you way back when? And I should mention up front here, folks, Brian's had more than half a dozen CFO career chapters, so he's one of those serial CFOs. Well, Brian, what would you share with us?
I'd probably say the biggest moment was when I got my MBA. I came out of my undergrad and work was going well. I was advancing in my career, and I was, probably, latter part of the mid-20s, and I kind of thought I knew everything, right? This business stuff is easy. I can do this all day long. Then I went into and got my MBA with a specialization in finance. And I quickly realized that I know nothing, and I'm going to be learning about this every day for the rest of my career. It really gave me the insight and the importance to, kind of both cross-departmental and cross-organizational collaboration, particularly from the quote-to-cash perspective and understanding that and how each department plays a role in making an organization successful. So I think that really was pivotal in my career.
Did you originally step into industry in a finance function or a finance capacity, or what was the your foot in the door to industry?
I'd say I really first started to get going when I joined Cable and Wireless, and that was in a position of I was in credit and collections. That was in the finance operational side of the house, and believe it or not, it was even like collecting not even on active accounts, but accounts that had already been suspended, and you're trying to negotiate and cut deals to get whatever you can out of them based off of the early term fees that they had. So that was the first step into finance, and I've pretty much stayed in the financial side of the house ever since.
Now, you had a few years out there before you went back for your MBA, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, about
Okay.
5 or 6.
So we can imagine as far back as maybe when you were doing those credit collections, an MBA began to come into focus. You began thinking, how do I get to that next level? How do I get beyond this? And I think you shared that you were a little intimidated by the MBA and by business in general, and the MBA was going to swing open the door to allow you to think a little
I think
differently about
that's
business.
really the key. Is it made me realize that I have to be successful in a financial position. You really need to understand how a business operates to give it. Usually in a finance organization, you've got your analysts, your critical thinkers, those types of folks, and getting them to be able to digest it and dissect a business from an operational perspective and lend that level of thought towards the organization, I think is powerful and meaningful.
Frequently finance leaders will tell us that accounting is the language of business and that it allows them to change industries. You didn't change industries, really. Telecom is really where you have built this industry. You've had multiple CFO chapters within that industry. Why is that?
I stepped out once for about 4 years. But in the early part of my career, when I was gaining both my financial and operational experience, I got introduced to many different telecommunications organizations globally. I was on the trade show circuit for a long period of time, and I established some good rapport. And I think I also got kind of known as someone who could get things done, a doer in the respective organizations that I worked for. And so, it's pretty fortunate. I mean, I haven't really had to go out and look for opportunities. They've come to me, and I really believe that's because of my knowledge within the telecom and technology sector and the relationships that I've built. So that's really what's kept me in there. I mean, I have a lot of people that I've worked with, worked for, they worked for me, that are all really good friends in my life. Just this past weekend, in U.S. Watts, which was early in the '90s, I was at a Phillies spring season game with the CEO and COO of that company when I was there. So, you've got friends for multiple decades at this point.
What are as you advance in your career, again, you make it to the C-suite fairly swiftly. Now, I'm not sure how large these companies are. Is there a particular weight size of company that you began to understand very well and find attractive to build your career in?
I think that's fair. I think call it maybe the first 8 or 9 years of my life were spent in companies that were, probably in like the $50 to $100 million range. And then it was kind of when I went to New Global Telecom, where at the time that company was, I think, 270 million. And I'd say like my sweet spot is probably the 500 million and under. And I've probably spent the better part of my C-suite experience in that, let's just call it the 200 to 400 range.
So much of the telecom story I recall, and I never followed it that closely, seems to be like small companies being eaten up by larger companies. Describe what was the nature of a lot of these chapters that you had throughout your career?
I think that my career just kind of was fortunate in that deregulation happened. And when that happened, a lot of opportunity came across from multiple different layers of business and products and things along those lines within the telecommunications ecosystem. So I think I probably levered that pretty good throughout my career.
Give us a sense of the timing of that regulation and what have you, and how that, that experience that you had allowed you to enter a lot of other businesses and understand the dynamics that were at work.
Yeah, for a lot of the young folks out there, they probably wouldn't realize that at one time your telecommunications was just AT&T, right? And so that they deregulated AT&T back in, I think that was early mid '90s. And then we had the Bell operating companies, Verizon and the one in Colorado, U.S. South. So those broke out. And then from that, you had a whole bunch of other businesses that were supporting those respective businesses this barrier to entry wasn't that difficult to get into it. And it just created thousands and thousands of opportunities for businesses to grow, thrive in that environment. And then, of course, what happened is that moved on, the M&A activity in the sector started picking up, and then you could go out and people started doing roll-up type of strategies. The business itself is in theory pretty easy to run, but in practice, quite difficult. And so you began to see organizations that started to fail. You went through some pretty heavy bankruptcies, between WorldCom, Global Crossing, et cetera, that because the industry got so much attention and so much money pumped into it that, things were, you always had to grow and you had to grow fast. And I think that created the opportunity for, my decades-long journey within telecom, and to lever situations like that and use my experiences along the way that I picked up early, maybe earlier than others, to be able to have an impact on situations that were either distressed or were turnaround opportunities.
And so there were career opportunities that you accepted that might not have been for every CFO, but given your knowledge and experience in turning around some of these, what was necessary to get them back on track? I mean, was this your expertise for a period?
I think it became my expertise. It wasn't something that I set out to do. But, when people kind of ask me, what do you do? I say I'm an operationally focused private equity CFO. I didn't start out that way, but a lot of the operations experience that I got in the beginning gave me the visibility to look across the organization, look cross-departmentally, and understand how things worked, and then tie them back into the financial organization. So when I looked at that, first and foremost, when I come into some place, I basically clean up the finance organization and department, and then I use that to look out across the business and go, where else can I help? And where else can I give assistance and guidance to help the organization get healthy again? And that's kind of how that happened. And probably from New Global Telecom forward, I was tasked with numerous of those types of opportunities. And then I started to get known within kind of the private equity sector, and those folks are looking for people like me to come in and do that at multiple portfolio companies.
And, again, you mentioned, again, the private equity piece of this. You became known by some of the private equity firms as being sort of a CFO or a C-suite executive who was, this is the one you want. You're sometimes working in distressed operations. There are layoffs at times. You got to make some tough decisions.
You do. You have to make some tough decisions. But if the bones of a good organization are there, it's, I don't want to say that it's not difficult, but it's really more commitment, resiliency, perseverance with regards to making the decisions and holding accountable the organization to the things that it needs to do to become healthy. I'd really say that's a little bit more of the secret sauce, is just the ensuring that becomes part of the DNA, gives the organization the ability to do that turnaround. And obviously, you've got to have the cash to run through that, and so you do that through the cleaning up of expenses and things along those lines. But it usually does take an economic partner to work with to help get through that.
I just want to point out, and I'm just going to list some of the titles that I've seen on your bio, just because I think it'll help the listener understand, or really understand how you were that person. You were a chief operating officer for the company you just mentioned, New Global Telecom, back in 2000 to 2004. You were with a company called KDDI Global, Kitty Global, CFO of that for nearly 4 years. You were a COO for Tenet TNCI, Nationwide Integrated Communications Solutions. You were a CFO for Impact Telecom. You were a CFO for the Filati Network. Anyway, I just think it speaks volumes when you see all of these entities. Some of your chapters are 4 years, some of them are 3 years, but there's just a string of them. And we get a sense of someone who comes out the other side pretty battle tested. When the folks from Fusion Connect, you intersect their world and join them. Fusion Connect, for those folks who might not know, is a Morgan Stanley company. Is that right? Or is
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about this opportunity and why it's what sets it apart, perhaps from some of the other chapters on your resume?
Sure. We talked a bit about earlier about the telecommunications industry and kind of where it is in its life cycle. And so it's competitive, it's saturated. So companies, particularly along our side, have to find a way to evolve. And, evolving is through, kind of cloud collaboration and things of that nature. You can kind of see where it is based on even how we're holding this conversation here today is kind of via the cloud. So I was attracted to the opportunity because it was, kind of taking this legacy telecommunications business and evolving it into a cloud communications business. And that's what attracted me to the opportunity. And then, we're more than halfway through with regards to executing on that strategy, and I feel strong about where we're headed.
Yeah, we want to ask you more about Fusion Connect, but I just want you to think back here. Would you have done this another way? I mean, here you've had a successful CFO career after, one chapter after another. Still, knowing the opportunity and the landscapes out there, would you have picked a different industry, or is telecom in your blood and it's hard to imagine you doing anything otherwise?
For a long time, I kept thinking, I want to get out and try something different, do something different, another industry. And because my skill sets are transferable, particularly the financial skill sets are transferable. The finance it's a different product. It's a different, industry, but at the core, you still have to kick out financial statements. And so I for a while I thought about that, but now, and particularly, I'd say really, truly, this particular opportunity has provided me with some insight of, well, no, this is what I do. This is what I'm good at. I have through lots of experiences and in a long period of time, have the ability to look at these types of opportunities and understand and see where things are that need to be fixed and addressed to help get the business healthy again. And so I find a lot of joy and satisfaction. And now after all these years, having the visibility to kind of target and identify those things, like when you walk in the door, like, okay, that needs to be fixed. We need to get that there. This number needs to go to here. And knowing how to actually make that happen by looking at the financial statements, to me, that's kind of fun.
All right. Well, let's find out about this opportunity then. Your latest CFO chapter at Fusion Connect. Tell us about Fusion Connect. What's it about? What makes this company worthy of Brian McClintock to walk through the door?
Yeah, so Fusion Connect it's a cloud communications solution leader and a managed service provider. What does that really mean? We help customers with their business connectivity, their networking, their unified communications, and we do it by providing great customer service and support, and we kind of take the headache out for them with regards to this component of their infrastructure. I think one of the advantages that we have, a lot of folks in our business outsource, and they go overseas to outsource for customer service positions, for service delivery positions, things along those lines. We've made a conscious decision to pull back from doing that and do it all American based. Maybe has a little bit more upfront expense, but overall it's cheaper. And what I mean by that is it's cheaper because that experience in a competitive, saturated market is extremely important. And, we're driving really good customer experience metrics. And we saw that increase and rise when we kind of pulled back and kind of put all those positions again to be kind of American based.
Why is this? Help us understand why Morgan Stanley found this an attractive partner to have under its umbrella.
I believe I wasn't here when they got involved, but I think it was late last decade. And I'm sure it's the monthly recurring revenue. I mean, most customers are on 3-year terms, average lifespan of 8 or 9 years. And you have a business that has that type of MRR. It's an attractive business. Then it's just, okay, how do I continue to get it to grow? Because with that growth and and increasing the operational efficiencies, you'll get your EBITDA up, and the multiples on a business with that type of MRR is attractive.
Was this the first MSSP that you've been part of?
No, multiple. There was a component of MSP at New Global Telecom, definitely at TNCI, Impact, and Lingo. So it's
familiar ground for you.
Yeah.
What's different or sets Fusion Connect apart from those earlier chapters that you?
I think it's our heavy focus on our BNoC, bookings net of churn, right? So that always helps with regards to making sure that MRR is increasing, and that you're able to have predictability in your revenue streams on a go forward basis. And then our obsession with the customer experience and interaction. We didn't have the best CSAT and NPS scores. We some of them were negative. Now they're both high, industry leading high. We feel real positive about that, and that was a conscious effort. That was, and it's an effort that never goes away. Right? You always are striving to ensure that your customer experience is strong, healthy, and continuing to grow, because that's what we're doing it for, right? It's making these customers happy.
Did those turn around in those scores? Did that happen on your watch? And again, you've been there about 2 years now. Is a big part of that on your watch, or what would you tell us?
It started. I think it was starting before I got here. It really picked up probably middle of last year, and it just, because we just, as an executive leadership team, we were talking about it. It was something that we would talk about on a weekly basis, and it slowly became ingrained in our DNA that this is something that we want to be great at, and we take it really serious. I mean, for me, in my position, I get on the phone and I talk to customers and I talk to partners, and if sales personnel needs me to help with a prospect or an opportunity, I have no problem getting on and telling them about our company and how we'll take care of them once they're here.
Yeah, you said we began talking about it regularly. It was just always top of mind. Down within the organization as well. And this is a conversation we like to have with finance leaders, how they expose a metric or a number to the greater part of the organization and sort of educate them about it, why it matters to them or should matter to them. And just retracing your steps for having succeeded in the way you have in this respect, this customer experience respect. What is it that, as you look back, and again, I think you're likely to tell us really just talking about it and keeping it top of mind. But is there something else you did, other steps you took, other departments that you sought to sort of make aware more frequently, or touch base with more frequently?
Well, when you think about BNoC, you think about bookings, right? That's going to be your sales organization. That's going to be your marketing organization, because you need to generate leads. When you think about churn, you're thinking about your customer experience team. And then you've got to think about, okay, I can go out and secure those types of opportunities, but then I've got to layer it in and deliver it. So then you're talking about service delivery, and you're talking about customer support and customer care. And so we've made a very conscious effort on every monthly all hands call to discuss our BNoC, where we are with bookings, where we are with churn, where we are with installs and cancels. We also talk about our scores in CSAT and NPS on every all hands call. And Jack, I really think that it was seriously just that simple, just where you talk about it, you reiterate it, and you reiterate it frequently as part of our kind of mission is to what we're trying to accomplish with regards to our customers.
Do you think you have more customer data as well, though? More visibility through your customer success folks and everything they're trying to keep tabs on?
The position I'm in, I'm obviously a huge data guy, so I can't have enough data. So we do, we track KPIs, lots of KPIs every month. We track lots of financial ratios every month. We have a fairly large corporate dashboard that has key metrics from each respective department. I utilize those and look at those, kind of on a, if not daily, for sure weekly basis.
Did you move one of the metrics to the top of the? All these subtle things matter to us, but I mean, sometimes there's a metric that's sort of been there, but not been given the the daylight.
It was BNoC, and BNoC was always there, right? But it was more, let's think about bookings, and then let's think about churn. It wasn't thinking about the two of them combined. And I think once we pivoted to that jumped out from a metric standpoint with us as higher than anything else that we were focused on. Because you make that successful, the business is going to be successful.
By the way, is this do you operate virtually today?
It's Fusion Connect is, I don't know how many different companies it's been over the years, but there's probably at least a legacy, maybe 8 to 10 companies with that existed that came through acquisition. So we've people all over the country, and we are pretty much 100% remote.
Interesting. Yeah. Had you operated in that environment before COVID as well in your earlier roles, or?
I have. I've been in that type of environment. I'd say out of, let's just say, the last 15 years, I'd probably say that at least 9 of them have been in that type of an environment.
And is that common in telecom? Maybe it's more common in telecom than other industries that they operated remotely.
It wasn't so much before COVID, but after COVID, you see a lot more of it for sure.
Yeah. Did it change your management style or how you lead? Did you have to be more? Did you find you had to be more thoughtful, or it was kind of natural for you to?
No, I think it was an evolution. Working remotely is not for everybody, but then we kind of forced the whole country to do that. And it requires a little bit of different mindset's probably the right word. I think you can spot the people who are going to be successful to work remotely fairly quickly, within 30 days, and others that, need a little bit more guidance, management, leadership. But the people that, working remotely, you're kind of always on. There's not really a lot of off time. And so, in our organization, I've got people who report to me that are in each time zone for all intents and purposes. And I sit there and you have to be cognizant of that. So I say, look, if I'm up and I'm, if I'm reaching out and providing some instruction or an email or some sort of question to, the folks on the West Coast, and it's, 8:00 here in the morning, I'm not expecting them to do that. And I say, hey, look, don't worry about it. You respond to it. You work your normal day. and we'll just catch up in between those respective 3 hours. And I think people appreciate that and understand that. But I also do think that the the stronger employees are the ones that are kind of always on to a certain extent. And they feel a sense of we're driving this together. You have to get, I think, I utilize the video, right? So when we're having a group call or a Teams call, I'm asking everyone to kind of get on video so we can see each other, we can see facial expressions, we can understand that, as opposed to hiding behind an avatar or something like that. I want to see, are people engaged and and focused on the conversation at hand, or are they multitasking? So those are the things. Your communication, both in these types of calls and then verbal, is really important, right? Because if you don't structure your words the right way, people can take offense to that, or think that that's coming across in a maybe in a upset manner as opposed to a curious manner. So you gotta kind of work that in and make sure that you understand people's respective styles to how they communicate verbally and in writing.
I want to touch on sort of the competitive dynamics that your environment has, this space has, and whether AI-driven capabilities are going to be able to be an advantage one way or the other. Is AI going to be a strategic advantage for Fusion Connect?
I think so. I mean, AI, of course, has the strategic benefits, in terms of efficiency, scale, unlocking new revenue streams, and transforming parts of the business, such as creating a more intimate customer experience is one example. We're a big Microsoft shop. We do a lot of Copilot. We utilize that. It helps us keep track of it helps summarize some of our meetings. It gives us action items. And I think it's also a good tool with regards to taking some components of work that are highly repetitive, and enables us to put tools in place where we can take the creative thinking and analytical minds of employees to focus them on additional issues, as opposed to things that you can do nonstop, whether that's dunning notices, whether that's the initial customer care type of correspondence, those types of things.
Is there curious, you mentioned Copilot, wondered if you had a mindset when it comes to AI investment, and whether there have been discussions or policies put into place to manage just how many Copilot licenses might be required by marketing or by sales or by other parts of the organization. And are these conversations that finance takes part in, or what's happened exactly as some of these tools become available?
Well, we're always trying to stay at the forefront of understanding what's out there from an offering perspective. So we always dabble and play in new things. Not that Copilot's new anymore, but it's out there. So we adopted it fairly early. We also sell it as part of our licensing package. And so I would say that. Yes, involved from understanding and making sure that we're testing out new technology and getting an understanding of it, so that we can utilize that when we bring it to our customers to help them with the solution.
What about as you look at the expense related to outfitting the workforce with these types of tools? Is it a concern, or is there an approach you've adopted to sort of measure the ROI related to these tools?
It's an interesting question. The answer is yes. But I look at it from the standpoint of, what can we lever AI to do for us that gives us the ability to execute, our business faster, more efficiently, and enables us taking the resources that we have that may have been focused on some of those things that we don't need to do anymore to lever more into customer experience and where we're headed with our overall product roadmap. That answer the question?
Yeah, no, it's understandable. I'm just, some of the conversations we're having with finance leaders are, well, they'll underwrite the cost of such tools and products if they can demonstrate that the team is getting faster, if they can demonstrate that the department also wants to make 3 hires next year. Well, wouldn't a demonstration of how effective these tools are be that you only need 2 hires, whatever it might be? I mean, are those the types of discussions happening, or maybe it doesn't apply to
No, that absolutely happens. I mean, you take a look at the kind of like the high volume type of positions, where you're accustomed to seeing maybe a little bit more um, turnover. We look at, okay, well, it's turnover because it's a high volume position. They're kind of doing the same thing day in, day out. How can we lever AI to handle a lot of that repetitive work? And then maybe we do let go of some people, but we hire back more experienced people that can help lever the tools to make the business operate more efficiently and create a better customer experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of a senior management discussion that's been going on as you try to get a fix on what the what the new math of the operation might be. But what comes to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
I would say when I was recruited into TNCI, I came in as the COO. And, when I was meeting with the private equity group at the time, I was asking them like, okay, well, let me see your financial. What do they look like? Is this a good opportunity? Because I was going to have to move for that one. And I looked at everything and, it was good. $1 million of EBITDA a month, $12 million EBITDA business. I'm like, okay, there's enough to work with here. When I got out there and started digging in, I think I went to them within 60 days and said, you're not making $1 million a month. You're losing $1 million a month. And, here's a plan of what's going to have to take place to get healthy. I think that made them nervous. And so they went a little bit in a different direction. And we ended up spending more money. And so they came back and I said, look, I can, because then they moved me into taking over the CFO spot as well. So I kind of had both of those roles at that time. And I said, okay, here's a plan to get there, but we're going to need to do an acquisition. We're going to have to, to get over the hump, because we had a very large legacy, in-ground telecommunications infrastructure that we needed to rip out. And so what we ended up doing was we acquired Impact Telecom, and that gave us the resources and the EBITDA to execute on a strategy that a year after that took place, we took the business that was at that time losing about $1.2 million a month, and we took it down with the acquisition down to about $600,000, and then within a year with the work to cut out costs and rip out that network, we turned it into $1 million a month EBITDA business. And so everything that was along that journey was all about executing on the plan to put us into that position, because we saw we could do it. We could, but we had to be very diligent and unwavering in our commitment on the execution. So I think that story really goes a lot. You start off with hearing something about, financial statements that for all intents and purposes were incorrect at the P&L level, and how you needed to take that, identify it, and then quickly, look for your path on how you're going to overcome the obstacle, which in this case was really both execution on operational improvement, including cost reductions, as well as an acquisition.
If you had not taken on the acquisition, what might have happened?
I think really three things could have happened. One, we would have looked to have sold the business and taken a loss for the investors. We could have, put a few more $1 million in to run the business to essentially get the positive BNoC. And that would have been another path to go. But there was a little investor fatigue at that point in time to invest more money in an acquisition, you obviously invest more money, but putting more money into this operation just to make it a little bit incrementally better was not something that we're looking to do.
I'm just curious, as you think about that path, all of what had to be accomplished in the period of time, was there a specific moment when you realized you had succeeded?
Yeah, there's absolutely. So when we were looking at, our plan to execute and rip out that strategy, at the end of that, it was almost tied to the calendar year. And we showed in our forecasting that I think it was October would show a loss of, maybe $100,000. November would essentially be break even, and then December would be about $400,000 positive, based on the timing of everything. And so when we got there, October and November were pretty much in a line, and December came in at positive 600. And that was the moment that we realized, we did it.
Perfect. Again, you've walked in to so many different CFO roles now. I just imagine the CFO office and you walking in and saying, "Here we go again."
Yeah.
What is you've had to get your bearings quickly. You've had to get to know the team that you're going to be working with, addressing some tough challenges with. What is the sort of the mindset that you've adopted as a CFO capable of advancing into all these different companies and rolling up your sleeves?
I'd say it's probably really three things. One is show calmness, because if it's a distressed environment, people will tend to be nervous. Just because it's distressed doesn't mean that it's a good opportunity. And I think that being in the lead financial position in a company, that you need to evoke confidence that the business is going to be okay. So I think that's important. I think it's also important to, I'm big with regards to modeling the way, right? I'm not going to sit there and ask you to do anything that I either haven't done or wouldn't pick up and do right now. And, we're going to get through this by, locking arms and being, fighting through these issues together. And sometimes that means you're going to need to go and focus on this and this daily task. Maybe it's the cash forecast. I'll take the cash forecast today. I'll get it updated and get it sent out, so that people can, focus on something that's more important, that they're, have more skill sets to do. So I think, showing people that you have that and you're willing to do that is very important. And then last, I've kind of always been a KPI guy, so tracking the KPIs, measuring the KPIs, holding people accountable for the KPIs. I think that's important too.
I want to characterize it this way: managing private equity partners. You have partnered with many, in these businesses with private equity. Any advice to CFOs who perhaps for the first time are building relationships with private equity and understanding their needs and wants?
Gain their trust through transparency. When private equity folks talk to me first, I say, listen, I realize this, but part of my job is managing private equity's expectations and thoughts with where the business are, and managing the CEO's thoughts and expectations where the business are. and kind of trying to make sure that those things are always aligned, right? Because the CEO is running down the strategic vision of the business and how to execute on that. Private equity is looking for how am I going to make a return on my investment, right? And so you got to be able to talk through those and ensure that everyone's kind of on the same page.
Well, finally, we'd like you to look forward, and we're wondering what your priorities are as a CFO of Fusion Connect for the next 12 months. What would your priorities be?
It's going to continue to be increasing our BNoC, increasing our CSAT, and increasing our NPS. If we execute on those three things, the investors will be happy, management will be happy, employees will be happy, customers will be happy, our partner channel will be happy, if we do those three things. And, that's why they're at the top of the priority list for us when we talk about on every monthly all hands call. Those are the things we hit first. So executing on that is really top priority number one. A little bit more operationally would be, the business, as every business always has the ability to increase operational efficiency. We had a great year last year, 2024, with regards to doing that. So we went from a spot of, kind of being overwhelmed with all of the initiatives. We took them off in digestible chunks during the course of the year. And now when we look at this year, we still have some more things to go and do, but we feel really confident about our ability to do it because we bid off much larger projects last year and executed on those. So I think we're all pretty excited about, where we end up a year from now.
Brian McClintock, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jack. I appreciate you having me.